Welcome to a mysterious realm where monsters dwell, where shadows walk, and where nightmares take on the form of fangs, scales, and claws. Blackwater Media presents Creature Feature Anthology 4. Before I get into this story too deeply, I'd like to note that I've never had sleep issues before in my life. No insomnia, no sleepwalking, no sleep paralysis, nothing. A couple of years ago, a friend of mine named Jeff and I took off for a trip to Mexico for my birthday. We were really excited about it. The weather was great, the hotel was nice, our room seemed perfectly fine. Now, the first few hours of the trip, everything was normal. We ate dinner, walked around, unpacked. Then we started getting ready for bed. I always feel a little anxious when I'm traveling to a new place, just because you never know what could happen. So of course, going to bed, I felt a little off in that room. But I didn't think of it as anything strange. I chalked it up to the jitters of the first day of travel, and I knew that I would settle in. So we went to sleep. And for the first part of the night, I don't remember having any dreams. Everything was just black, which was weird because I always have dreams and then remember them the next day. And then the shit happened. I started having a night terror. And in my nightmare, I was lying in bed and staring towards Jeff's bed across the room. And there was what looked like a dead boy standing over my bed. His eyes were black and hollow, his skin was rotting, and part of his head looked damaged. His mouth was gaping open, and he reached towards me as if he was trying to tell me something. However, according to Jeff, I wasn't laying in my bed having a night terror. I was standing over him in my sleep, silent and staring at him. He asked me what I was doing, and then I just fucking started screaming. I have no recollection of standing over him, but I woke up across the room, far from our beds, by the balcony door. I was on my back, kicking and screaming as if I was trying to push something off of me. When I woke up, I didn't even know who was screaming until I realized it was me and Jeff. I didn't go back to sleep that night. The rest of the trip, I barely slept, and I kept the lights on all the goddamn time. But nothing else happened but that first night, and that was enough for me to never want to sleep again. I have no idea why it happened, and to be honest, I'm not 100% sure I even want to know. Part of me wonders if someone died in the room and was trying to communicate with me. Either way, I was in no state to solve a murder mystery, I'll tell you that. There was something else that struck me as odd, even to this day. Me and my friend were screaming like crazy. We made so much damn noise, and yet no one ever came to check on us. We shared a door with the people in the room next to us, which was always locked, and the hotel was pretty full. Yet no one ever came to our room, and no one made a complaint about us screaming. It's the craziest, scariest shit that's ever happened to me. I work in the registrar's office of a university, and I have a very strange story to share with you. Now, all of this took place pre-coronavirus, before I had to worry about those stupid-ass anti-vaxxers or the ignorant, selfish anti-maskers. It feels like 100 years ago. Anyway, one afternoon I was in the office, and I got up to go to the lounge for a cup of coffee. I walked past a room with a window in the door and automatically glanced in the window. You know how you do. There was a woman standing in the room, except there were only 3 people in the building and the other 2 were in the office behind me. I took a couple of steps and realized what I just seen and backed up quickly. But by the time I got back to the window, the room was empty. There was only one door, and when I opened it to the room, it was empty. Now at the same building, a coworker was telling me that she was in the office right around the corner from that same room. She couldn't see the door, but she could see the shadow of the door on the floor as it slowly opened and closed. She was the only one in the building at the time, and she just flat refused to check. I arrived about an hour later and she asked me to check the door, and it was still locked. I worked there for about 3 years, and every single one of us had stories. We heard voices in empty rooms. Once when we were sitting in the office and we heard somebody breathing in an empty corner. It was common to be in one of the rooms and think somebody had just walked into the room, only to look up and find that the room was empty except for you. I had one stupid-ass manager who scoffed at all our stories. She didn't even believe us when we told her there was something fairly benign but creepy in the building. We were sitting in the office, she scoffed loudly and said, "Hey, if there's anything in here, prove it." And oh my God, we all held our breath, kind of nervous, a bit scared, but also curious. And just about the time my manager was getting that look on her face that said, "Ha, told you so," something was thrown out in the hallway. Holy shit. It took several minutes to work up the courage before going to check and finding that a book that normally sat on the bookshelf near the front door had somehow gone from that bookshelf around the corner and halfway down the damn hallway. The manager never talked about it and quit shortly thereafter. I've since quit also, but I last heard they were still hearing voices and seeing shadows in the building. You know, it's a hell of a thing having to deal with an office ghost. My father told me about a very weird and frightening thing that happened out at his place a few years ago. He said that he awoke one night to the sound of dogs barking and realized that the neighborhood dogs were barking at something that was moving parallel to the road. When his own dog started barking, he went outside to see what was up. Across the street is pretty much all forest except a church directly across the street that was at the time just a gravel lot. He said the moon was very bright, so even in the dead of night, he was able to get a look at something that shocked and scared the hell out of him. Running across the lot was a huge creature that he said had all the features of a gigantic wolf, dark fur, long wolfish snout, but the goddamn thing was running on 2 legs, and he could definitely hear the sound of the creature running full tilt across the gravel. He said he could also hear terrible sounding grunts, growls, and the most bone-chilling howls imaginable. So he kept his eyes on the thing until it disappeared into the darkness. Now, as you might imagine, more than a few things freaked him the fuck out. Number one, it was definitely wolf-like, huge, and ran on 2 feet. Now try having a dog run on gravel versus a human, and you can tell the difference in the sound. In terms of size, both my father and I have witnessed large animals like bears and moose running through the underbrush, and according to him, it sounded like it was of a similar size to those creatures. He estimated it to be 7 to 8 feet tall. Number 2, It was easily running somewhere around 40 to 50 miles per hour in the clearing of the lot, then slowed down again as it went back into the woods. He was able to compare the speed because the road itself has a 45 miles per hour limit, so it was going just as fast as a passing car. Number 3, the wolf creature's huffing, gasping, and growling was so loud he could hear it from his front door and was obviously not human. We looked online later to compare its sound to other animals, and it really didn't sound like anything he'd ever heard before. Another strange thing, there was almost a synchronous reaction that the dogs had. He's never heard dogs react like that before. Both him, my stepmom, my stepbrother, and several of our neighbors can all account for hearing the strange barking from the dogs, but it was only my dad who actually saw what they were barking at. Nothing happened like that since, and I've never personally witnessed anything like it. The location of the encounter is right on the border of the Cascade Mountain Range and is surrounded by federal land and some privately owned land. If you're familiar with the area, or shit, even if you're not, take my advice. Stay away. I want to tell you about an encounter with a dog man that changed my life. Now, before I get started, let me make something as clear as I can. What I saw was 100% real and 100% terrifying. And no, it wasn't a bear, it wasn't a coyote, and it damn sure wasn't my imagination. It was in the evening, and my family and I were coming back from Chesapeake Beach, Maryland, from having dinner. It was me, my brother, mom, and dad. I was 16 and in the back right passenger seat talking football with my brother. Riding along, I was just looking out the window, and there was this little road that merges onto the main road to the left, so as we merged, we picked up a little speed. We were going maybe 25, 30 miles per hour, and you had to cross this little bridge, and it's really bumpy, so we slowed down even more. Once we did that, I looked up ahead, and about 35 to 40 yards ahead, I saw something standing on the wood edge off to the right a little, but it was exactly at the edge of the woods. It had both arms on a tree just standing there, meaning its right arm was on the tree about shoulder height, and its left arm was in basically the same position, so its arms were spread out with its hands on the trees. It was easily 7 feet tall, maybe even taller, and it had a wolf-looking face, only larger, like a dire wolf from Game of Thrones. It was dark too, almost pitch black, and the hair was medium length. I could see that its legs seemed to be arranged like a canine, you know what I mean? Kind of backwards, the way a dog or a wolf's would be. And then this fucking thing actually locked eyes with me. I saw it for about 15 to 20 seconds because of the distance. And I thought to myself, God damn, what am I looking at? It had very pointy features and didn't look like how people describe a Bigfoot, but actually a werewolf. A lot of people call it dog man, but I'm more inclined to say it was an actual wolf man. I said out loud to my family, "Did you guys see that thing?" And they were like, "See what?" To this day, my family still doesn't believe me, and most other people think I'm crazy or lying, so I very rarely tell anyone about it, but it was real. It was there, and what bothers me is I can never forget the look of those large, menacing yellow eyes. It had a look of pure evil. Are these kind of things out there all the time? And where do they go? And where do they come from? And what do they want? You're listening to the Blackwater Media Radio Network, the finest in digital audio entertainment. This is Blackwater Media coming to you from the great city of Atlanta. Before I get into this story, I need to give you just a brief background. First off, my wife and I are both from a very rural part of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I always used to tell people that I had to drive 50 miles one way to go to McDonald's growing up. It's the type of place where, now that I go back to, you realize how very empty it is in those spaces between the towns. Anyway, on to the story. My wife was visiting family for the weekend in Upper Michigan and was driving home to Wisconsin early on a Sunday morning. She described the morning as cloudless and sunny and seemingly normal. She left town and was on the outskirts where there's few houses but a good number of fields. About 15 minutes into the drive, she said she saw something out of the corner of her eye out in one of those small fields. She said her first instinct before she focused on it was that it was a horse. You know how when you spot something like a dog in your periphery and your brain uses available info like movement and relative size, and all that says, dog. She said that's exactly what happened, but her brain said horse. When she turned to look, she said she saw an absolutely gargantuan white or cream-colored wolf loping along the tree line in the field next to the road. She said it was trotting along casually in the field, but near the edge of the forest, and that other than the fact that it was huge, said it looked like a normal wolf. She said she was so stunned that she put on the brakes in the middle of the road and sat and watched for approximately 15 to 30 seconds. She confirmed in that time that it wasn't her mind playing tricks on her, or a trick of the light, or anything. She said it was literally a horse-sized wolf. Now, after those 15 to 30 seconds, she said it stopped, stood up on two legs, and looked directly at her, and then bounded into the trees. She got her phone out and called her dad, who said she probably just saw a big gray wolf. Now, we've both seen gray wolves, and while they are large, she said this thing wasn't even close. To her estimation, it stood 5 to 5.5 feet at the shoulder. That is, when it was on all fours. Now, for clarification purposes, I've actually seen the field she was talking about. It's maybe 50 yards from the road to the tree line, if that, and there are no obstructions. Along the edge are small spruce trees interspersed with larger oaks and whatnot. So there's a fair number of things for the eye to use as reference. She said she never lost sight of it until it went into the forest. Since then, we've learned that these creatures are usually referred to as dogmen. And based on what we've read and heard about these creatures, my wife said that she never wants to have that kind of experience ever again. And I don't blame her one bit. I've always felt the presence of spirits. They often come to me as a dreamlike vision while I'm just about to drift off to sleep. In my youth, I got flashes of scary, gory, horrifying imagery. Then I would feel a presence. I learned to communicate with mental imagery and found if I allowed the spirits to pass through me, they could finally rest. It's been many years since I've tried to communicate. In the last 4 or so years, I've had a new experience with visions of a flash of a dead, decapitated, bloody body in a car wreck. I started feeling a very heavy negative energy around me at home, like I'm being watched. It's strongest just before bed. This entity isn't interested in communicating or trying to get my attention to pass on. It feels content to stay and lurk around me in my bedroom. One night a vision came to me unlike any other. A goat head with horns and a woman's chest with goat legs. After some research, I discovered that this was Baphomet. This was an image I'd seen before, but it scared me so damn much, I put it out of my mind. Eventually, I performed a sage rubbing, read the 23rd Psalm aloud. I lit a white candle, fanned the smoke, and made ash crosses above the doors. I tried imagery of me cutting the head off this beast with a sword. Since then, I've gotten a new vision. A three-horned, bull-headed man's upper body and lower legs like a hooved animal. Visions of a cliff with gray, naked bodies holding onto each other, pulling each other down. I feel worried, scared, nervous. This entity won't leave, and I'm horrified. I don't know where to turn. If there's anyone out there with any answers or a solution, I'm begging you to reach out. If you're enjoying the show, go on over to blackwatermedia.net and join the Swamp Hunter Society. Just click on the Become a Member tab on the menu, and for only $4.99 a month, you can have exclusive access to the finest paranormal, horror, and supernatural story narration content available anywhere. It's the ultimate digital audio exploration into mystery, magic, monsters, and myth. Become a Blackwater Media Swamp Hunter Society member today. I live alone, and have for 3 years since my divorce. And it's mostly been great to have my own space and my own house where I'm free to do whatever I want, whenever I want. That said, I spend most of my time in the evenings in my upstairs study reading, painting, writing, and listening to music. In the eyes of most people, I don't really have a social life, and that's okay with me. For the most part, I've never felt uneasy in my own house, until about a month ago when I went to the kitchen at night to make a drink. Now let me explain something to you. My kitchen overlooks an overgrown garden, which in turn overlooks some woods. It's a fairly rural area, and it's very quiet at night, which makes it a friendlier environment for some wildlife to come out. I often see foxes and deer, and I've been woken up at night by the scream of a fox at about 4 a.m. once. And they like to hang around outside the front of my house because there's easy access from there to my back garden and then to the woods. My kitchen has this big window which looks right into the garden. And at night when the lights are on, I can barely see more than a few feet ahead of the window as it acts sort of like a mirror. Well, on this particular night, the few feet ahead of me that I could see was all this thing needed to make itself visible to me. I hadn't noticed it until I looked up and out of the window after making my drink. It was a bipedal creature, skinny, but very tall with hind legs and covered with hair, except around the face. Now, It sounds ridiculous to some people, but the first thing that popped into my head when I saw it was werewolf. Its mouth or snout was protruded slightly, somewhat similar to a canine's, and it had ears that were pointed back at an angle from what I could see. And it just stayed there looking at me with two huge yellow eyes. His head was tilted to the side and its bottom jaw was slightly open. I didn't even know how long it'd been there. I'd been in the kitchen for about a minute before I even bothered to look out of the window. I just froze. You think you can rationalize what you do in situations like that? But I was fucking frozen in terror. I was telling myself to move, but my body felt icy cold. I couldn't do anything. Eventually, like after 10 seconds, although it felt much longer, I managed to move and ran out of the room, not daring to take my eyes off the creature. And as I did so, its head rotated to follow me as I left to the comfort of the upstairs, which was the creepiest thing about it. Since then, I've not gone into my kitchen at night, save for a few necessary occasions. I'm preparing everything I need before it gets dark, and then staying upstairs for the rest of the night. If I absolutely need to go into the kitchen, I rush in so I can get out ASAP. That feeling you get when you turn all the lights off before you have to go back upstairs and feel like you're going to be chased upstairs by some unknown entity? That's the feeling I get when I go into my kitchen at night. My brother and I grew up in the middle of nowhere. It was a dead-end street with a total of 8 houses on it, with a total of 4 other kids to play with. The street was roughly a mile long if you did a whole lap, so it was the perfect place to run after school. On the longest stretch of road, there was a forest on one side and a large field on the other. The field was unkept and usually had pretty long grass that would come up to about your knee. Anyway, one afternoon my brother and I went running, and less than a quarter of a mile into the run, we saw something run across the road from the field into the woods. All right, now check this out. It was large and it ran on 2 legs, but the sense of balance was all wrong for a human. The best way I can describe it is that it leaned backwards, kind of like a bear would when it's on 2 legs, but it moved super fast, way faster than any person or animal that I've ever seen. My brother said that he saw horns and antlers on it, but a deer wouldn't be able to run that far on 2 legs, and it was much, much faster than a deer anyway. We turned around and went right back home. Since then, I've tried searching the internet for what I saw, and the closest thing that I could find to match was a thing called a wendigo. I still don't know what the thing was, but I damn sure hope I'm wrong about it being a wendigo. About 3 years ago, I was out hunting with my dad, grandpa, and uncle. We split up into 2 groups. Me and my dad were in a group and my grandpa and uncle in the other. We were hunting in the same area, and we brought walkie-talkies so we could talk to each other if we got something. My dad and I were walking down a hill and exiting the forest and entering a field, and there was another hill in front of us from the other side. We heard coyotes howling. We stood listening to them for a second, After about 20 seconds of listening, we heard another noise from behind us. It sounded like a weird mix of a roar and a howl. Now, I've heard coyotes in my life, and I've never heard one that sounded like that. When we turned around, though, we saw something right out of a damn nightmare. It was a large, black, canine-looking creature standing next to a tree. And this thing was huge and was easily 4 feet at the shoulder. But what got me was those disproportionately large eyes. They were orangish and so big that I could see it blink every few seconds. It didn't charge us or run away. It just stood there staring at us as if to say, "Leave while you still can." After a while, it started to get dark, and we called my grandpa and uncle on the walkie-talkies and told them what we'd seen. They agreed that it was a good time to get the hell out of the woods and that we would meet back at the vehicle. We clicked on our flashlights to see better, and right at that moment, we heard a branch break, and then another loud, roarish howl behind us. When everyone was back at the truck, my dad explained again what happened, and the look on my uncle's and grandfather's faces was a look of shock and terror. They didn't see anything, but they said they'd heard the howl. We all loaded into the truck and left. A really long time went by before any of us set foot in those woods again. Hey everybody, this is Dr. William Lester, and I want to tell you about a new membership opportunity from Blackwater Media. Now yes, you can sign up for the regular Swamp Hunter Society membership at $4.99 a month and have access to the premium content. But you also have the option of getting the Blackwater Media VIP full year membership. That's right, with a one-time payment of just $49.99, you can have the same access to the same premium content, early releases, at a savings of almost $10 off of a regular membership. So if you enjoy the finest in paranormal and cryptid horror, head on over to blackwatermedia.net and get your Blackwater Media VIP full year membership. I've heard a number of the Dogman encounter stories on Blackwater Media, and I thought I'd throw my 2 cents in and share my own experience. I live in central Michigan, about 20 minutes north of Lansing. I was on my way home from work, and it was about 1:45 in the morning. I was going about 55 and saw something about 100 yards away stand up on 2 legs out of the ditch on my passenger side, take 3 to 4 running steps, and completely clear a 24-foot road, and got about 6 or 7 feet up in the air. Now this thing landed on the other side of the road, and it went down on all 4s and took off running across the field on my driver's side. I slowed down to see if I could get a good look at it, and it was huge. It was covered in black fur, and it was fast. Now, in terms of how it looked in detail, I can only describe this thing as the biggest wolf I'd ever seen. There was an otherworldly quality to it, the way it moved, the power it displayed. It's really hard to explain it, but it felt as though I was trapped inside of the worst nightmare I'd ever had. Let me stop right here and say this. The long pointed ears and the wolf's snout were bad enough. But man, those eyes. This creature had 2 huge fucking eyes that were like a surreal mix of yellow and orange. I can tell you this, there was something in those eyes that conveyed pure hatred, rage, and evil. The creature cleared about 150 yards in a matter of seconds and ran into a stand of trees in the middle of the field, and I lost sight of it. There was a decent amount of moonlight, so I could see it fairly well. It had to have been at least 8 feet tall because the ditch is 3 to 4 feet deep, and I could see the torso and head poking out of the ditch before it jumped. Once I lost sight of it, I didn't waste any time getting the hell out of there. If you're a skeptic, or maybe on the fence on whether or not Dogman exists, get your ass off the fence and join the club. They're real. It's so terrifying to know that creatures like that are out there, lurking around, waiting, watching. One night during the summer of 2020, my cousin, his friend, and I were driving back home from my cousin's girlfriend's. I remember it vividly. We were driving back at about midnight, and we caught sight of a man with a bicycle. Now, I live in a big city, so it's not anything out of the ordinary to see at least one person walking that late or biking or whatever. I remember seeing the man just standing there, and he turned his head slightly to the left, and I saw that he didn't have a face. Not only that, his skin seemed to be chalky white, and he was wearing a dark green or gray t-shirt, dark trousers, and some kind of weird boots. He turned his head further to the left, and if he'd had eyes, he'd be looking dead at us in the car. But his goddamn face was nothing but a blank wash of white skin. We were at a stoplight, and I was in the back seat closest to the sidewalk that the man was. We were at that stoplight for about a minute or so, and I was just telling my cousin and his friend to look because the man was just standing there doing nothing. He wasn't by a bus stop or anything, and he wasn't using a phone, so it was just out of the ordinary to see someone stand so still like that and not move. The man was also not using the crosswalk. He was just standing there and didn't turn his head or make any sort of movement. I can tell you for sure, it was definitely the weirdest thing I'd ever seen. I know what I saw, and my eyes are pretty good even in the dark, so I was creeped the fuck out. I've never seen anything like it again, and I wouldn't want to. Yes, I've had paranormal things happen to me from time to time, like seeing shadow people, but nothing like this. And I also have never seen anything that wasn't at home or at another person's house. It was just terrifying. It's made me question myself, but I swear to God, I know what I saw. Whenever you happen to look out the window, especially at night, or even contemplate what kind of things exist just beyond the confines of your door, remember this story and see how easy or difficult it is to fall asleep. One weekend, my girlfriend Lisa and I went up to our mother's house up in the Wisconsin woods. She raised chickens and had a beautiful Siberian husky named Jupiter, who was caged every night to keep him safe as there were black bear in the area, coyotes, and a rumored mountain lion. Anyway, they had a motion-activated yard light on their garage which would activate a security alarm in the house. Now, the second night we were there, Jupiter started barking. And then the alarm went off. Now the motion detector is set to only go off if the motion is at 4 feet or higher. Lisa hopped out of bed and shut off the alarm. We both hurried out to the enclosed porch to look around, and you better believe I had my damn pistol well in hand. Now about that time, the chickens started acting frightened and upset, and you could hear them going berserk in their coop. Lisa thought that someone was trying to steal a chicken. I made my way around to the coop to unlock the door, and all of a sudden, this huge wolf-like creature on 2 legs came barreling out of the coop with a chicken in its jaws. When it saw me, it dropped to all fours and took off running at a crazy speed. At that point, I ran back into the house in a state of complete disbelief. I locked the door behind me. Lisa was there, just inside, and her mother came tearing down the stairs asking what all the ruckus was about. I described to them exactly what happened and what I'd seen. The biggest goddamn wolf I'd ever seen, easily 1.5 feet taller than me. And I'm 6 feet tall. I mean, I watched this thing go from 2 legs to 4 legs in a matter of seconds and dash off with a chicken in its mouth. It's crazy too. There was no sign of damage to the coop, inside or out, so the creature had to have removed the latch to the coop door with its hands. Of course, we didn't get much sleep that night. Well, shit, we didn't get any sleep. That's the truth. And yeah, it'll be a while before we head out for another trip out there. It'll be a good long while. A coworker and I were in a certain area in the wilds of Wisconsin where we do environmental monitoring. Now by monitoring, I mean standard rain event monitoring of an MSHA regulated site. And due to lack of rain, the site was not discharging water to sample. The quarry had been producing a few weeks prior, so we were grabbing a few samples off stockpiles for quality assurance. It was an overcast day, almost dark, with the sun barely breaking through deep gray cloud cover. Now keep in mind, the site was in a wooded area, in some places densely wooded. And upon exiting, my coworker and I noticed a deep growl or scream coming from the deeper part of the woods. And after a few minutes, my coworker shouted several hellos, but got nothing. About 10 minutes later, we're on another part of the property just outside the tree line in an old quarry grabbing some more samples. Suddenly, a flock of crows on a ridge about 100 yards away started panicking. This went on for a minute or two, and upon looking up at the crows, I noticed a large brown and gray upright figure skulking at the tree line. I was able to view the creature for 10 to 15 seconds. All I can tell you is, it was a giant wolf that was standing upright. That's right, a goddamn gigantic upright walking wolf. And in the time we saw it, it ducked down once and then stood back up. Now let me explain something to you. I'm 6'4", 230 pounds. And I could tell that this damn thing was at least 7.5 feet tall. Anyway, we kept looking in that direction, and eventually it ducked down and never rose up again. After that, we left and spent the day trying to figure out just what the hell this wolf-type creature really was, and how hard it would be to do our work with the knowledge that something like that was out there somewhere. Now, of course, I'd heard of people claiming to see Bigfoot, but I never really thought much of it, as the odds of such a creature even existing were small. I'd never have given credence to the existence of a giant bipedal wolf. It looks like I was wrong. We're currently looking into a trail camera as the sound came from deeper from the woods, which is another parcel of land we don't have permission to be on. And to be honest, I'm not all that excited to go that deep down into the woods anyway. Let me tell you about an experience that my wife and I had last autumn. And by last, I mean late September of 2020. I wanted to be specific because I assume that people will be listening to this at any point in the future. Anyway, my wife and I were sitting out on the back deck, listening to music and having drinks. This is something we do fairly regularly in the fall, as it's generally cool enough to enjoy the glow and soft warmth of the fire pit and the crisp autumn air. With the kitchen window open, the music from the stereo wafted out into the evening air and made everything that much more pleasant and enjoyable. It was a Friday. Now, earlier that afternoon, I'd grilled a couple of steaks and a package of brats, and that, along with the potato salad, the grilled zucchini, and Texas toast, would easily make an autumn weekend's worth of delicious dinners. Anyway, our back deck looks out across the backyard, which goes on about 30 yards, at which point a fence squares the yard in. Now, beyond that fence, there's a stretch of woodland that starts about 10 yards beyond the fence line and grows denser as you move inward. So we were sitting out there talking about getting another couple of pieces of Halloween decoration and how good it was to see the changing color of the leaves, when my wife suddenly pointed out to the far side of the yard, beyond the fence and into the woodline. What she saw, well, what we both saw, was what appeared to be a pair of eyes. Glowing eyes, and I mean stark, orange, amber eyes looking dead at us from the woodline. Then the eyes rose up to at least 8 feet off the ground. Behind those eyes was the outline of what looked like a giant wolf. It took a step forward, and we got a better look at it. And this thing was fucking massive, with black fur and a huge German shepherd looking head. Now, we sat there frozen and frankly horrified. My wife broke the silence and quietly asked, "What the goddamn hell is that thing?" And all I could do was shake my head. And at that exact moment, we saw it drop down to 4 legs, turn, and shoot off into the woods. I thought about it, and there's really no way for me to correctly convey just how fast this creature moved. Anyway, a few seconds later, we heard a bone-chilling howl in the distance. We just sat there, calming ourselves by sipping on whiskey highballs. My wife got her iPad and started doing searches. After only about a minute, she learned that these creatures were known as dogmen, and they've been sighted all over the country and even other parts of the world, and that they're powerful, vicious, and seem to regard humans with absolute malice and contempt. So, that's how we came to learn about these creatures. I've heard and read about how so many people say they want to see one. I promise you, you don't. My wife and I have nightmares about our encounter. Terrible nightmares about being stalked by the creature and then turning around only to see a menacing pair of large amber eyes.